So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Tech Exchange Seminar Series. As you're all aware, this is our the Institute of AI and Data Sciences attempt to try to get the entire university community aware of all of the exciting work that's going on in the field of AI across campus. And I know that there are a few people online, a few people here. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today. I'm Ranga Setlur. I'm the Associate Director of Community Engagement at IAD. Our first speaker is Professor Barry Smith. He's, of course, very familiar to many of you. He's the SUNY Distinguished Professor of Philosophy and the Director of the National Center for Ontological Research and the Guru of Ontology. And he needs, for the people working in the ontological space, he needs no introduction. So Barry always has very provocative titles for his talks. And this one, again, is AGI, has nothing to do with human intelligence. And so looking forward to see what Barry has to say about it.
And I'll start with some autobiographical details relevant to what was just said. So I'm not an AI hater. So I think AI is fantastic. I think it's surrounded by hype. It's surrounded, and the hype is mostly financially motivated. They need to keep presenting wonderful stories about what AI systems can do in order to get all the money that they need in order to keep their show on the road. I think that the show will continue even when the market crashes, and it will be very useful. There are all kinds of useful things that we can already do with AI, and we will be able to do more of those useful things, including things which are done in this building, whatever happens to the share price of NVIDIA. So 3 years ago, I published a book with a German collaborator of mine who was, and still is, an AI entrepreneur in Germany. He's also a biologist, a mathematician, a philosopher, a journalist, the father of 5 children. He's a very impressive person, and we wrote this book together. So he was facing a problem in his attempts to build AI for German companies, in that all the companies wanted a chatbot. They wanted to be able to save money with customer queries by using AI chatbots. And he knew in his bones, and he also knew from his own experiences, that it was impossible to build a chatbot which would satisfy human beings. As everyone knows who has used bank computer chatbots when they call their bank, they do not produce conversation-ready inputs which do not cause extra work, shouting or expressing yourself 7 times slightly more clearly, or slamming the phone down. They don't produce utterances that would make the human user comfortable. And that's because, like everything that machines do, chatbots are simple systems and human beings are complex systems. And that's a biothermodynamics statement. So the mathematics of simple systems and the mathematics of complex systems are very, very different. And you can never build, using a machine, a good, accurate simulation of the behavior of organisms, because all organisms are complex systems. There will always be a gap between what the computer can do and what the human would do. All right, so that is the background. And what this means basically is that even though AI systems do wonderful things, a lot of the time they're cheating. In other words, they're creating a simulation which they claim is a simulation of a human process, but which is not a simulation of a human process for the reasons I just gave, which means that inevitably it will at some point break, do something which falls outside the frame that it should fall within, because it's a simple system. All right, so now I'm going to talk about AGI, and I'm going to raise questions based upon this idea that AI systems are in a way cheating. So that when they cheat, they do wonderful things, but it's still cheating. All right. And so that I'm going to take these two definitions of AGI, both of which are quite common. There are several definitions of AGI in the literature, but these are two good ones for my purposes. So we're going to talk about human cognitive abilities, about tasks, and about autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. I'm hoping that by the end of this talk, you will all find that particular definition ridiculous. And so we have these human cognitive capabilities because of our genes, but also because we go through lives in which we are embedded over and over again in different sorts of group behaviors or team behaviors. So this happens already when we're being suckled at the beginnings of our lives. Then we go to kindergarten, and then we go to school, and then we go to university, and then we get a job. And all the time we are working with teams in contexts where the teams are influencing what we do, helping us to do the right thing, and thereby, we hope, improving our intelligence, our cognitive capabilities. So they're synonyms. And so these are the environments in which these particular co-workers or co-laborators are operating with us to build this team-generated improvement in our intelligence capabilities. And so I call these team niches, and I'm working on a whole theory of team niches, which is based on existing work on what they call distributed cognition, which is not my work, so I'm just filling in some gaps. So all the time, in many of the things we do, we rely on other people. And if we want to do really ambitious things, then we're going to be relying on lots of other people. And I put the Buffalo Housing Court here. That's going to be one of my test cases for economically valuable human tasks. Not that I have any experience in the Buffalo Housing Court, but I have friends who have had experience. All right, so what do you get from being part of a machine, of a team? You can explore multiple paths. You can have 6 ideas and have 5 of them realized by your collaborators. And then you can choose the best one. That's already a really efficient multiplicator of intelligence. Then you can get coaching. You can specialize, move towards the specialization in those areas where you're not really good at something, but that's actually the area you really like to work in. And this happens all the time to all of us. It happens when we're queuing at a cafeteria. We can have other people queue on our behalf, or we can see which queue is longer or shorter. And it teaches about standards and norms. It teaches about competition. And it's a kind of free, competitive environment where we can learn to run more quickly along the channels that we are interested in. We get reviews, we get congratulations, but then most importantly, we get humiliation and embarrassment. They are the most important features of working in teams. In other words, if we do something wrong, then we may very well suffer as a result. That too is an immense accelerator in advancing human cognitive capabilities. All right, so work slop. This is just the latest of the ways in which the simple systems called AI are revealing that they are simple systems because they fall below the expectations that human beings have. So this is very new. This is September the 25th. Work slop is AI-generated work content that masquerades as good work, but lacks the substance to meaningfully advance a given task. And I don't know if any of you have heard of Gary Marcus, but every few days he documents another one of these cases where AI falls below the expectations of human beings. So why is the return on investment of generative AI so poor? Well, MIT Media Lab reports that 95% of organizations see no measurable return, and of 1,150 US-based full-time employees across industries, 40% report having received work slop in the last month. And so why is this? Well, it's because AI systems are never shamed for doing bad work. It doesn't make any sense because they're algorithms. You can't shame an algorithm. And so there are no controls, really. And I've been working a lot with ChatGPT and graphics of late. And I would say 1 in every 4 of the results will say, go to this link where the result of its graphics attempt, which are quite complicated map-based graphics. Go to this link, I go to the link and it's dead. And that's a case of work slop in the more general sense. All right, so we all know here in this room much more about how LLMs work than I know. So I'm going to go very quickly through this. We input a prompt. That's a human-produced entity. We're in control of the prompt. Then the prompt gets pulled from our control, and it's turned into a sequence of numbers. That sequence of numbers is then embedded into a large vector numerical structure based on the transformer mechanism. And so what is happening is that the machine is programmed to apply a statistical algorithm to high-dimensional continuous numerical vectors. That's what it's doing with my prompt, or with the numericalized version of my prompt. And then when it's finished doing that, which has nothing to do with human intelligence, or they're creating a cheat mechanism for making you think that they have something to do with human intelligence. And it's a really fantastic cheat mechanism, which is why it convinces us by producing really good answers on many occasions. It converts the results back to text, which we can read. And then the machine has the function, not of cheating, of course, they wouldn't say that, using an input prompt to generate an output response in just the same way that Google search and pocket calculators do. Just fantastically better, mostly, until they're not. All right, so I just said most of this. The question is, it's called AGI or AI, artificial intelligence. Is it really intelligence in the same sense of the word that we use when we talk about human intelligence? I'm just raising this question. I would say that it is not the same. Rather, it's a simulation. It's not intelligent. It's simulating intelligence to a certain degree, which will get better, but it will never get perfect. To a certain degree, with a simple system, which is a great achievement. They found a way of making a simple system emulate a complex system. Now let's see what's happening. So some of you will have heard of the clever Hans effect. A German school teacher, we'll see his name in a minute, had a horse. And he would go around Germany. I think people paid money to see this horse. It was Clever Hans, it was called. And the horse would do arithmetical calculations. And the people were amazed, so they kept coming back to see Clever Hans. And so it's a quite complicated looking mathematical calculations, it seems. Now, it turns out that this is all about training. So Clever Hans has been trained to cheat. And basically, how the cheating works is the question will be raised, maybe by a member of the audience, maybe this gentleman here, and the gentleman then will twitch a little bit, and Hans will start pressing his foot on the floor, and then the gentleman will do that again, and he'll stop. And the audience will be amazed. He'd just done an arithmetical calculation, when in fact, he was trained to cheat in a certain very subtle way. And so this is a high school mathematics teacher. He knew what he was doing when it comes to finding interesting looking mathematical calculations, the results of which are just integers. And so the horse seems as if it's really intelligent. That's why people pay money. But it's just simulating intelligent behavior. Now, there's already a literature on Clever Hans and LLMs. So I'm not making this up. There are talks and papers about how LLMs are fooling us in something like the way that Clever Hans was fooling all of those gullible Germans. So this is what happened. Sam Altman trained a machine to simulate human intelligence. He called it ChatGPT-5, and it's really good. It does a fantastic job. It produced this graphic. And with a bit of help, this is one of the cases where the link did in fact work. So just study this very carefully and see if you can see anything wrong. So this was the result. The previous graphic was, mathematically speaking, a little bit hard to follow. It's also written in German cursive letters. So this is what ChatGPT, the great intelligence generating machine, came up with. And it has this. So anyway, I don't need to say anymore. So there is an IQ test for LLMs, but they do badly. At 74, I think, is the average, 74, which is much less than the average human will do. And that's because there is work slop, or there are ways in which it falls short, particularly when it comes to graphical manipulation. There isn't an IQ test for teams, but there is this thing called the HBDI, which is an instrument for addressing features of members of teams which need to be tested and which need to be checked for and trained in and so forth. And so one of the dimensions of this test is the interpersonal expressive intuitive dimension, and the other is the big picture thinking, imaginative, visionary dimension. And then I have here good luck with all of these in LLMs. LLMs can do some of this, analyzing facts, pretty good. Not processing numbers, I'm tempted to say a little bit better. Logical thinking also pretty good, but they always reach roadblocks where they can't yet get quite far enough, and sometimes they can add more training or change the programming to overcome those roadblocks. But then there are other roadblocks, and there will always be roadblocks because of the gap between simple systems and complex systems. Now, I came across this paper a couple of days ago. It's a very new paper. This studies the idea that AI is a capability, AI itself is a capability arising from the relations among human actors and algorithmic devices. I think that I accept this. The wording is a bit different from what the authors here had. Human intelligence is a capability. The machine which contains the programming of ChatGPT is a tool. It's a machine. It doesn't have intelligence. And no tool has intelligence. But it enables fantastically intelligent work on the part of human beings. And
you think of the animals like a dog.
Oh yeah, I could talk for an hour on animal intelligence. That's another lecture. I'll come back. So in fact, it comes in here. So we evolved from animals. Animals have instincts which are tied to the ancestral environment. Humans were forced out of their ancestral environment, for instance, by ice ages, but they survived, but they lost all their instincts because they no longer worked, which meant that they were biologically deficient, but they compensated by creating human intelligence, which is quite different from animal intelligence. Animal intelligence is based on instinctive responses. Human intelligence is based on creativity, basically. So we make artificial environments, including environments with tools like ChatGPT. And this has been going on now for hundreds of thousands of years. We're building ever more complicated niches with high cultures, really expensive research, as in this building here. So we're adapting. We're not merely adapting to our environmental circumstances, we're creating new environments, man-made environments. And now these are the marks of human intelligence. I don't need to go through these. And this is Peter Higgs in front of the Large Hadron Collider. That is an example of an environment and of a team to which Higgs sort of belonged, which was based upon these adaptive, creative powers of humans working in teams with team leaders with visions, crazy visions, which they managed to get funded. All right, so human collaboration implies shared experience. It involves mutual criticism and thereby inhibits work slop and enables planning and foresight. So we can look forward hundreds of years. We can look forward to what happens when we're dead and arrange things so that our plans now are realized when we're dead. And now let's go back to AGI just to finish. So this is, IBM says, a hypothetical stage where an AI system can match or exceed human cognitive abilities across any task. So I think this cognitive abilities across any task is obviously wrong. So you can easily think of many cognitive abilities which you could never run on a machine. But that's not the interesting point. The interesting point is any task. So what do they mean by task? So this was a slide I had 10 days ago. The idea would be that AGI would cover everything, but in a shallow way. But humans, they cover only a few things, but they go deeper and they can have springs of effectiveness which spread and lots of people join the team and so forth. I don't like this account anymore. So I've been looking at what they mean by task. And so they mean here task involving moving physical things around, colored bits of plastic, I suppose. Or they mean task involving image classification, object detection, question answering, code generation, motion prediction, motion planning. These are tasks which truly could be divided up into small bits. They're not the tasks that humans engage in, which are economically relevant and cognitively such that we are able to perform them. So this is what it really looks like. You have all the tasks in the mind of the people who write archive papers on tasks. And then they get the machine to solve some of these tasks, and then they cheer. But they never will solve all of those tasks because there are no such tasks. This is a picture of Zermatt in 1880, 1932, 1968, 2007. Think of every little house on here as a task. But then think more carefully, how many tasks are involved in each house? And how do they change when the weather changes, or if there's an avalanche or some other kind of, or if the workers go on strike? All the time, the tasks are changing, and each task is not really one task. It's connected with 7 or 17 other tasks. And then you want to build a hotel. Think of how many tasks that would involve. So the task, there is no every task. It doesn't make sense. Just as to talk about every motion in Buffalo, in the university at Buffalo, it doesn't make sense. And so outperforms humans at most economically valuable work. So building a new hotel in Zermatt, you're not going to get an AGI to help you to do that. First of all, you need a very good facility to negotiate with politicians, for instance. And now let's try Buffalo. And or real estate in general. So in the olden days, real estate was really easy. The king owned everything. But now, if you want to do anything in the real estate world, you have to address several of these organizations or constituencies with hungry hands out that they want some of your tax money in order to enable roads to be built to match the greater traffic density which will be brought by your hotel. So these are the same, like the beginning of the same list, but bigger. And this is, so all of these together stand between you and building your hotel. And there are more. This is just my guesswork. They form the framework in which the economically valuable tasks are going to be realized. And I tried it. I tried to get ChatGPT to give me the same information about Buffalo. Buffalo Housing Court is on this list somewhere. It took me, I don't know, quite a long time to get this far, and it's still not right. The layout is still not right, and the font is too small, and so on and so on. But now the idea is that in order to build a hotel, or even just a house, or even to knock down a house, which is even harder, you need to go through that. Now, to build a machine that can go through that is obvious nonsense. It doesn't make sense. And so the concept of AGI as a machine which can perform the cognitive processes needed to address all economically relevant tasks doesn't have anything to do with the way human intelligence is exercised in the real world. That's the end.
Any questions? So the work slop that you were referring to, right? I mean, that's not the, obviously humans can be sloppy too.
Oh, yes.
So if you, the contrary view, but that as a measure of whether that
humans have embarrassment and shame.
So, I mean, in some sense, there have been attempts to sort of get these chatbots to sort of pretend to have those same kinds of feelings, right? Like, I mean, training them what that means and when, like, I mean, the situations in which. So sometimes it's sort of like, I mean, the definition of Turing test for these has continued to evolve, like, I mean, from what the Turing test original definition was to how that works in the context of this. So some of these examples that you gave, I mean, it's, so even this, like with the planning and you had all these different, I would think that, like, I mean, at some level, this entity that is capable of actually, especially here, like, I mean, all of those regulations that you listed, most of it is, I mean, you're trying to come up with a blueprint for what would I need to do to build a hotel in Buffalo, right? Like, I mean, given all these things, I would still sort of say that it's possible for that engine to produce something that may be more coherent than what I, as a cognitive.
Did you ever talk to a politician?
Well, I mean, if you, it's even as a human, like, I mean, I would have difficulty talking to a politician because, I mean, politicians come in all different types of flavors.
That's why we have teams. There are some people who are good at talking to politicians.
I think it's sort of a philosophical discussion, right? That's open here.
A question about the survey, right? It's like a lot of people didn't get a benefit of the AI. But if we do a quick survey of all the students, I'm sure they will say differently. You know, most of them actually using OpenAI, Cloud AI, right, to do a lot of the coding kind of exercise. They feel like they get it. They mean a lot of them pay the subscription themselves.
So I did say at least twice that I think that OpenAI and the other LLMs are fantastic. No, they'll always be fantastic, but they have their limits, and people don't like to hear that.
The only thing is probably define the AI.
Well, to imitate or simulate human intelligence is a first step, but they can't simulate everything.
Thanks, Barry. I'm like working on real world applications of trying to use the AI and figure out ways to optimize it with my staff, because certain members of my staff are using it and it is becoming the slop work that you're talking about, because you know, every single faculty person is brilliant, which you can't use the same word over and over and over. But my question is, like, it's here, we want to use it, right? Everybody is using it. How do we balance the speed that it provides with being able to make it better so it sounds more authentic? I mean, I've been working with it, like, and putting in my own text, like, make it sound like me. And, you know, and the whole thing, like Ranga was saying about the shame and whatever you're saying, the shame and all that, like, it is a little bit easier when I'm asking ChatGPT, when I get frustrated with their response, I'm not demeaning or diminishing a person when I say, no, that's not what I want. No, that's not what I want. Like, it just keeps spitting out stuff. And like, nope, you're not even close. Nope, you're not even close. But on Ranga's point about the real estate thing, I do think there is some value in being able to use it as the preliminary tool to set a framework to ask the questions that you want to ask.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So, like, I don't think we should.
But that's not what the IBM definition of AGI says. It's
right. I'll say I agree with you.
So I think that
balancing the speed with the limitations is what I'm after.
One of the things that I think we should do is to catalog somehow the kinds of tasks that AI can indeed help with, and then the kinds of AI tasks where they'll just be wasting your time. So I've been trying to get the ChatGPT to draw maps of different wars, and they make mistakes. So I tell them, correct these mistakes, and they do correct those mistakes, but then they make new mistakes. I go over and over again, never getting anything like a usable map, because they don't understand that if they've corrected mistakes once, then they're not allowed to uncorrect it later on. So we need, yeah. I think we need, so just as every university in the world now is building a new AI building, we need to have a second building, which would be the AI compensation building or AI safety building, whatever we call it. Well, it's going to give you useful information about which direction not to take. That's my idea. And which claims should be exposed to be hype rather than serious contributions to useful exercise of AI skills.
Sounds like we're saying there should be a department of artificial stupidity as well.
Stupidity is only one dimension.
No, I'm really, seriously, I'm really intrigued. But when you talk about AI, we think of like one encompassing system that's trying to replace every single expert that's out there. Do you think there's a role in AI of sort of mimicking like the human approach where you have different expert systems that could be talking together, and that might be a different way of using it instead of just like a single ChatGPT or something?
So I haven't thought this through, but the people have suggested to me that one idea would be to build teams of AI systems working then with one or more humans, or maybe not working with one or more humans. I don't think that would work, because if one machine, it has limits because it's a simple machine, it's restricted to Turing computable algorithms, then 6 machines are going to be restricted to Turing computable algorithms too. Even if you wire them together, they still have to produce Turing computable outputs, which are always going to fall short of what an organism might do.
All right, so that was a spirited discussion, and let's thank Barry again for a intriguing talk. So now we follow one philosopher with another. Our next speaker is John Beverley, who co-directs the National Center for Ontological Research with Barry, and he'll talk about the Cyber Ontology Foundry. He's also one of the associate directors of the Institute for AI and Data Science.
Hi. Hello, can you hear me? Is this close enough? How about that? Can you hear me? I hope so. Okay, just want to get it situated first, because once I start talking, I won't want to stop. So hi, John Beverley. Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to be talking about a cyber ontology foundry effort, and hopefully some of those words make sense, but maybe not all together. I'll slowly unpack what I'm talking about and why I think it's important. So first, I'll unpack what I mean by a foundry. Basically, a lot of what I do can be summarized over here in this picture. I'm trying to sort data into information, into knowledge, into creativity, and we're nowhere near the creativity portion of this. We're somewhere in here with our data. Very, very rarely are we in here with knowledge. And what does that mean? Well, it's hard for us to connect information or data that we have to other data sets. It's often siloed, like this group over here has a different syntax than this other group. This group over here has a different semantics in this other group. And so really it's challenging to get here based on the way we organize data, the way we gather it, the way we use it. So this creates, as I said, silos of information. Like your group has some data about this, another group has some data about that. Can't sing together, can't talk together with any reasonable way using standard computational strategies. And this is a big cost. It's a huge issue. Billions of dollars are wasted trying to connect databases to other databases, trying to connect semantics to other semantics. And so well-known problem, also well-known solutions to these problems, and well-known solutions are in the space of where Barry and I work in ontology engineering. Ontologies, the sorts of things we build, born out of philosophy in its infancy, but now kind of ramped into the engineering space. They're just well-defined machine interpretable vocabularies that help create like an implicit semantics or make an implicit semantics explicit over across the different data sets. So this data set over here, this data set over here, they have some formal semantics in common. Whether it's made explicit is another question. So what Barry and I do with our philosophical hats on, because we're pedants and we spend a lot of time thinking about the basics of logic, we come in and say, you forgot to add this. You forgot to add that. And it's just basic principles of logic that people often forget to add, and it's so obvious you'll forget to say it. You'll forget to put it in your databases. That's what we do. We come add that layer on top, and that's ultimately, to my mind, a large part of what we do as ontologists. We're not alone. Lots of people are doing this sort of work. It's a big growing community. Explosion of interest. People on media articles. They're making Medium articles about how easy it is to do what we do. Not that easy, because basic logic is surprisingly challenging, as several people in here know, because they're taking symbolic logic with me right now. So even the basic stuff can be quite challenging. And if you're just going at this task of integrating data sets without kind of like a best practices that's based on something we can all trust, like formal logic, you're just going to create more silos. And we know that because this is the history of our field. It can be easy. It's challenging. A challenging way involves logic and involves like careful recipe-based constructions of ontologies and ways to represent that implicit semantics explicitly. And so this was learned, a lesson learned many years ago when the gene ontology was created, the most successful ontology in the world in terms of financial support. Billions of dollars been supplied here, all tasked with like modeling genome, all that data, all that information. Researchers early on in the heyday, when they started gathering all this data, recognized that they needed to get a common language down, because otherwise they're going to talk past each other. And they did. Gene ontology. It was a simple structure. It's grown because of all the funding and the interest. Since then, it was very successful. So successful, too successful. As a matter of fact, it led to the proliferation of many, many other ontologies that extended down from it, many of which were not developed in coordination with any others, many of which led to silos again. The same sort of issue that happens when people are gathering data about the genome happened when people were constructing ontologies about data about the genome, because they weren't doing it in a coordinated fashion. So this gets over to the foundry notion. So it's in 2005, Barry was there. Open Biological and Biomedical Ontologies Foundry was created. And this was a group of people, researchers, both in some philosophers, some logicians, some biologists across the medical space as well, agreeing on a set of principles on which they would construct ontologies, because otherwise they were going to go all over the place, right? And so these are the principles they currently have. They were kind of vetted over time. You see some of this numbering's out of sync. That's because some principles were dropped when they realized they weren't needed, but others were kept, others were added. But they are not alone. This was a very successful effort insofar as it got a group of people with like at least minimal standards on ontology engineering practices talking to one another within the foundry. It was so successful, it spurred off additional foundry efforts to have a lot in common. They represent their ontologies with a common format. They require scope and context descriptions of their terms. They have textual definitions. So like when we construct representations of things in the world, classes of things like chairs and tables, we require they have definitions so that everybody knows what we're talking about. And we think a lot about definitions. There's a philosopher coming out of us. We think very carefully about what it means to say table, what it means to say chair, what it means to say gene. Right? And we require in these foundry efforts that people do the same. We give them recipes for making this easier, but it is a challenging thing that we do. In any event, we also require they be open. These foundry efforts are open source efforts. Barry's been one of the champions of open sourcing, and I think for good reason. If you create proprietary standards or proprietary ontologies, and people can't access them, but they need them, they're probably not going to pay you for them. They're probably going to build their own, and that's another silo. So open source, all about open source. Common format, the one we use is this W3C standard. OWL, W3C, of course, standardizing group that tells us what HTML should look like. It's a very, very big organization, a lot of power behind it. They have a format that these Foundry efforts follow. They also have certain kind of ways in which we anchor all of our terms in a common way, so that if you're talking about a duck and I'm talking about a duck, we give it a unique identifier so that I know when I'm talking about your duck, I'm talking about your duck, and when you know I'm talking about my duck, you're talking about my duck. And we can track that with machines. I don't have to think about it. The machines do the resolution for us and make sure that when we're talking past each other, that's clear, and we're talking to each other, that's clear. We also do version control, basic version control. We also require that our structures have specified scopes. So if I have an ontology for the human genome, I have a description of what that covers. Should it cover like all the processes that go about in the genome? Should that cover all the entities, the enzymes and whatnot? Probably a lot of these things. And so I just want to make clear we define that scope whenever we're constructing these ontologies, so we know what's inside the ontology, what's outside the ontology. Otherwise, we tend to get into this issue of like scope creep, where we start adding things that we didn't expect to add. And then that can also lead to the creation of silos. So it's important for us early on to identify the scope so we can track what should be in and what shouldn't be in, so we don't fall into the bad practices that previously led to those silos. So again, as I mentioned, definitions. Need to know what our terms mean. Need to know what the data is about, need to know how to represent it for humans. And we all, kumbaya, all love to collaborate. Probably the hardest principle to follow, we got to work together. And that can be tricky, but we still have to. It's crucial because, again, like silos, this is all about addressing silos. If you're not collaborating, it's very likely that you will create something that's different from what I'm creating. And so we need to open communication about what we're doing, and where the lines are, and how we can collaborate and communicate about that. There has to be somebody, because of that, we can talk to. Locus of authority. And we, generally, this isn't always adopted by foundries, but I think it's a good one. We have some labeling conventions. When you're talking about labels, there are different ways you can do it. It's easy to get confused about labels, but hopefully you can see the picture here about communicating, about collaborating, about openness. Don't go do your own thing. Please work with us, and we'll have some principles that we all agree to, so we can ensure that we're working together, not working apart. One of the principles, having a top-level structure on which we start modeling, a high-level structure that can cover all the different representations within its scope, not necessarily something that goes all the way down to tables and chairs, but just kind of a common starting point. You can think of it on an analogy with like Python versus its libraries. Python is a high-level language. You use its libraries most often. I want to build something with data frames. I use pandas, but I can also use other libraries from the mother language, Python, a top-level ontology, which might come in different forms. But ultimately in the the Obo Foundry ontologies ended up taking this form, is a common starting point from which you can derive these more specific ontologies. And this was created, Spaceship Formal Ontology, created by my colleague Barry Smith. And it is now used in over 700 open source projects. It's used in the Obo Foundry. All of these Foundry efforts adopt it. It is the Python of ontologies. It's everywhere. And in the history of the field, Obo Foundry adopted, kind of a watershed moment in this Foundry efforts for collaborating across the board, not just in the open biological and biomedical space, but in the others. In particular, which was, I guess I should say, more recently spurred with more force in 2020 when the BFO, the Basic Formal Ontology, was identified as an ISO standard, so international standard, the first top-level ontology to ever be designated such. This is what we work with. This is what we play with. This is what the Foundry efforts adopt. It is, again, the most widely used. It's a great place to start. Widely used is important, because if you're using this, it's easier to use other extensions of it. Just like if you're using Python, it's easier to use its libraries than if you're using something else that's not so widely developed. Yeah, always worth pointing out. It's also mandated for use across the DoD and the IC communities. So they all have to use basic formal ontology, which, as you might expect, makes Barry quite busy. I'm a little busy too, because they don't know what we're doing and they need to learn. Again, 700 projects. That's Foundry stuff, though. It's Foundry high level. This is like a common community using common standards, common upper level, so that we can develop ontologies that, again, kind of make explicit the implicit semantics in data so we can address interoperability problems. There's the nutshell. And now I want to talk about a specific new Foundry effort for the cyber domain. This is something I've been working on. There are lots of ontologies, lots of representations of data in the cyber domain. There have become more and more over the years as people have become more and more interested about the complexity of the domain. You can imagine very easily the complexity of the domain of cyber. Cyber can be potentially big. It's encompassing a lot of our lives. You've got it here. It's all over the place. Your phone can be exploited. Your phone can be defended against from exploits. Just think about it from the attack side or the defense side. Like, it's a big deal. We're always playing, as if you're like on the defense side, always playing catch up with the hackers, because you're always on the back foot. They always have the advantage. You never know where they're going to attack. It might be great if you could gather a bunch of data about attack patterns, traditional attack patterns, and do predictive analytics about what's most likely to be attacked now. But I can tell you, just knowing what I know from the space, there's a lot of data. It's not organized in a way that sings with other data. There usually aren't ontologies that are being developed in a coordinated fashion about that data. And so what do we have? Same old problem, more silos. What do we need? Coordination and collaboration around the cyber domain. Seems like a no-brainer. Fortunately, we have something like the gene ontology that's been developed by MITRE. So MITRE's a nonprofit military contractor, but they have a team that has been standardizing cybersecurity, defense, and attack data. And they've been doing this under this detection, denial, disruption framework. Now, it's pretty well developed, I'd say. It's probably better developed than the gene ontology was when the OBO Foundry kicked off. It supports all sorts of countermeasures like querying. It has representations for offensive tactics and procedures. Here's the developers say they like this diagram because sponsors seem to like it. I think it's really ugly, but like here's kind of a visualization of the sort of decision procedures you might run through. Like, they get alerts that some file analysis needs to be conducted because of an attack, and they kind of run through what type. Maybe they need to go over to platform monitoring because of some other thing that's going on. They kind of have options for doing that. And you can automate this to a large extent, like the detection, the decision tree as it flows out. You can kind of automate alerts to stakeholders or agents who are sitting at a computer watching a system get attacked. And so this can be very beneficial, very useful, and has been for a while. Its structure sort of broad. They have representations for things like artifacts, things like this, things that were designed for specific purpose, like, standing behind. Also things like digital objects or which may be things on your computer or your hard drive. They also have representations for defensive tactics, technique reference, etc. So they have representations, again, for the sort of gamut of information you might see in, say, a cybersecurity textbook, but also the sort of like information you might find if you're looking at an Excel file full of a lot of attack methods or attack like strategies or viruses or malware. Like, they have representations that kind of encompass all this stuff. So this is essentially just the highest level. I don't want to go too far down into the weeds because it gets a little complicated, but at a high level, this is their model. Now, some illustrations of some of the things they do. Offensive techniques can initiate access. They can have mediators, like an access mediator that can be a human or an agent, a software agent of some sort. But yeah, you can see this is also related up. As I said, that was the defend sides. This is what you do if you're blue teaming, you're like protecting. It's also integrated with their attack paradigm. So how do you attack a system? So they kind of run that gamut between both representations for how do you attack and representations for how do you defend. And they kind of red team and blue team, they say. These are the developers, Peter and Michael. They're lovely people. They're very interested in building ontologies and are also very interested in creating a foundry because they acknowledge everything I've just said about the difficulties of integrating with other data sets and other communities. And they're like, we need a concerted effort to get us on the same page. The growth and interest in Defend has also been paralleled by the growth of this Common Core ontology suite. Common Core ontology is an extension of BFO. It is something I'm on the governance board of, so is Barry. It is a suite of ontologies that are widely used in the defense and intelligence industry. There's a lot there. CCO is one of the other ontologies that's mandated for use across the DoD and the IC. And this is important to highlight because although it's being standardized as well outside of the DoD IC, just like BFO, and it's also being harmonized by our students here at UB and the Defend team. So we are bringing the structures together. They're putting Defend under CCO, Common Core ontologies, because they also work with the government over in the Defend and attack groups, and they have to use it. So now we're working together to bring these ontology efforts together. So increasing the semantic interoperability. You can see the Defend crew, this is just a snapshot from the repos. They're already doing some work on here, making the mappings. Giacomo is one of my students. He works pretty heavily on there. We just submitted a paper to an upcoming conference, STIDS, where they're illustrating all of the advanced work that they're doing. This was commits from 2024. They're far more advanced now, but it's happening, right? Like they're actually doing the integrating work, bringing things together like digital artifact over here on the core design pattern into a CCO representation of it, which you can see here on the left. So again, they're doing the heavy lifting. I'm gonna skip that one. So what I really want to talk about, what's most important here is why is that relevant for IAD? Okay, so there's an opportunity here to leverage the knowledge and resources from this group to help create a cyber ontology foundry. I think this is, again, a no-brainer. Like people want it. As soon as it comes up, it's exciting. These things, Foundry have been traditionally major efforts. They've brought in a lot of attention, international recognition, publications, sometimes patents. Like there are a lot of opportunities for growth. I think it'd be a good idea if we brought together the MITRE folks, if we brought together the UB community working on the mapping CCO, bringing together CCO and Defend with the IAD crew so that we can start a foundry effort. We're benefited. We have the way, we have like an outline for how this works. We have the principles already. We have the space already. We have the interest already. This is much better than other foundry efforts. I think, as conversing with Barry about this, I think what we need now is a party. We need to have a party. We need to bring people out. I mean, it's true. It's the social aspect. We need to bring people out, cybersecurity specialists. We need to bring people in a UB here who are interested in this topic. We need to get them in a room together. We need to present, lay out the idea, get their buy-in, and then start continuing collaboration, start continuing work in a dedicated space. And I think we can do this. I'd love to have this kickoff here. We can do this, and I'm proposing we do it at the beginning of the next year. And I have a student who has already started laying the groundwork, an administrator actually, who's laying the groundwork to kind of set this thing up. And she's been talking with Michael and Peter and my other students about how exactly this is supposed to look. As soon as I get some bandwidth, I'll start helping out. But the plan being, what I asked for you guys, can we have a party here? Also, can we use this? Can we bring this? We bring these repos that are already existing over to the IAD repo. Can we host this here? Put IAD stamp right on the top, next to MITRE, next to UB, and say, look at what we're doing, everybody. We can cite this in papers, and we can really take advantage of the international opportunities that are laying before us. So that's it. I want to have a party. We in? Yeah. Fantastic. He said yes.
Let's first thank John.
Yep.
So if you're going to do what you just said, then you need to involve the UB Center of Excellence in Information Systems Assurance, Research, and Education.
Okay. Yeah.
Because did they not do cybersecurity?
They have, yeah, cybersecurity.
Are there
education
people-
programs?
Yeah.
Shambhu is sort of, yeah.
It needs to be looked into anyway.
Yeah.
We don't want to leave out the engineering school and the computer science department.
But there are other, yeah, connections.
Yeah.
I love a big party. I mean, I'm not going to say no. Any other questions? Which one?
I have possibly a silly question. Would it not be counterproductive to have an open source like website of all of the knowledge, like from a national perspective of all of our knowledge of cybersecurity? Like, wouldn't that be like really easy to make it more easy to crack?
Yeah, so this is a good question. I've had this question myself. The general sentiment is the problems are hard enough that it's not such a concern. So so there is a like, if I can lay out the concern a little more. So now we have like all of our knowledge potentially, all of the knowledge we know, like open on the open space, like our adversary nations, like that can like come in, use that information against us. So on one hand, it's still complicated. On the other hand, not all of the information that would be for national security would be in the open space. So what happens often when we're working with the government, we'll build stuff in the open space and we will let anybody see it. But then what they do within an enclosed space is different. They may have different data. They may adjust things according to their local needs. They may, as a matter of fact, use the open space information as a bluff. Oh, you think that's what we say. I've seen that before. You think that's what we represent. Counter, counter, counter bluff. So there's a game of chess being played often, and this may have cut both ways.
So wouldn't that be also counterproductive if you're putting misinformation on the open source as a way to bluff?
Misinformation for some groups, right?
Okay.
Right? Yeah. I mean, so it is, but ultimately, I think beneficial because a lot of other groups will be using cyber ontologies, the ones that are on the open space. And, I'm not a perfectionist. Like if we can get some of the data integrated and interoperable, that's better than where we are now. And whether we do that by bluff and whether we're a little off here when it comes to national security, I think that's a cost I'm willing to buy. But good question.
So maybe I think I may have a more philosophical question. Like, this is something I had a conversation with cognitive science, one of my friends. And he mentioned all our humans' definition of anything, right? There's a vagueness of the boundary. For example, when we say the black, how black is black, right? There's a boundaries. And in our humans' communication, there's a boundaries always morphing, right? It's never precise. So how does it relate to the ontology here? So you try to put some kind of standard definition relationship. You mentioned the entities, action, actor. But what is entity? How do you define an entity? So whenever we try to put our words into defining things, there's always, depending on your interpretation. So it's very difficult to make it precise, not like a math language, right? So how do you deal with that boundary, which is never easy to define?
So there's a sense in which you're absolutely correct, right? There's a sense in which you're absolutely correct about like the vagueness of language. And this, I'm glad you said math, because math is a great example of this. But we actually have a touchstone because we need to represent our definitions in ways that machines can read, and that can look quite mathy. But math is also ambiguous. The piano arithmetic axioms underdescribe the natural numbers. Like they're incomplete, right? Or inconsistent, one of the two, right? So there's like logical barriers to some of the representation, but then there's the human side. So for my money, I want to represent as clearly as I can, as rigorously as I can, as precisely as I can in a way the machines can read what we think we mean. And then if that ends up being slightly different from what we actually mean, I want to represent that too. But that's hard, that slight difference often is harder to see if we don't have some formal representation, just like in math. Right? So I think we're playing a very similar game. And I'd like, again, not a perfectionist. Perfection is the enemy of the good. I'd like to get to a place where we can really see where that vagueness is. And right now, I think, and often, especially outside of the mathematical realm, it's not really clear where the boundaries are. I think we can get better. What do you think?
So I think after 20 years of working on exactly this problem. And then there were 20 years before that when I was working on philosophical aspects of also of this problem. We know where things go wrong. We know where vagueness can be dangerous, and we know what kinds of definitions can work against the dangers and what kind of definitions will encourage more dangers. We've learned all of that. And so now we come with our general's uniform and we stand at the front of the building and we shout at people, pointing out that there are now 700 different groups using this. You should use it too. We know that you don't like this term because it's so long and but we have to use that term in order to avoid confusion with that other term. And it works. It's working better than I could ever have anticipated.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah, there's a vetting that goes on, right? Like, and Barry's absolutely right. And he is the one that he is certainly stand in front of the federal building yelling at a general. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys.
Any more questions from the online audience? If there are any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask. And if there are no questions, let's thank both speakers again.
Come to the party. Come to the party.
And yeah, so we'll look forward to a party. Also, like just at the end of every one of these, again, we ask IAD is here for you. So if you have colleagues, faculty members that would benefit from speaking here using our this platform, we'd be happy to make that possible. So please let your colleagues know that this opportunity is available for them to use. Thank you. There's some snacks and water if you're interested. The next, so we have very interesting talks next week. It's October, 21st. Okay. Okay, the week after next. And the first is about the National AI Research Resource, which is very useful resource for people to have. And Varun Chandola was at the National Science Foundation program officer in that program. And then we have Mark Janko talking about network, spatial statistics, climate change, and health. Thank you.